be discussing some of the important questions from polity. I have read some of the current affairs documents which are available in the market, and I have uh, taken only important 45 to 50 important topics for this session. If there are any remaining, then I will send the document to the Mr. Mahendra Reddy sir, and he will forward it to you in the WhatsApp group. Okay, this is the thing. So without any delay, let's start the session. So important quality. So from some of the important current affairs documents which are available in the market and from the internet resources, I have from document only because with my experience, I'm saying they will not ask silly questions. They will ask only those questions which are very important for the examination, background link or conceptual link. So this is the first topic, impeachment of President of India. So this document will be shared to you after the class in the WhatsApp group. So try to revise whatever I have said in these things. So impeachment of the president is very important because in the recent times, Donald Trump has been the first president to get impeached twice in the House of Representatives of the USA. So let's understand what is the impeachment procedure in India. Powers and Lok Sabha, powers to the Lok Sabha, and Rasa case where Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha is not secondary house. Okay, in USA only House of Representatives can initiate the impeachment process, but in India both houses of the parliament, either house of the parliament can initiate the impeachment of the president. Here P, when I make it as it means this is the short form I write in my notes. Don't write these kind of short forms in the main answer. This is only for this because of B/O means because of. So in India, both houses of the parliament, any house of the parliament can initiate the impeachment process. But whatever the house, for example, in Lok Sabha, the impeachment process has initiated, and they have to follow certain procedure. And when it is passed to the second house is called as investigating house. Investigating house. If it is introduced in Lok Sabha or if it is introduced in Rajya Sabha and it is passed to the other house, that other house is called as investigating house. Okay, this is the difference which you have to remember for the prelims examination point of view. And this is the stage. So in the stage one, that is one of the house, either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, 1/4 of the members have to sign the charges. 1/4 of the members have to sign the charges against the president to impeach him. And 14 days notice is to be given to the president of India. And 2/3 total membership, not present and voting, but it is a total membership, which is important for the examination point of view. For example, in the constitutional amendment bills, what kind of majority is required? People present and voting or total membership? For normal bills, people present and voting or total membership. So what is the total membership of Lok Sabha? It is 545. So 545, 2/3 545 is required, not present and voting. Then after so there is in the stage one, you have to make in one of the house 2/3 majority, and in other house also same kind of majority is required. This kind of provision is present for the constitutional amendment bill also, CABC. To amend the constitution also, we have equal powers given for Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha. Equal powers given for Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha. These are the two things, two instances where you have equal powers to Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha. One at the president, vice president, impeachment of president, vice president, and election of president, vice president. Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha have equal powers, and the constitutional amendment bills, you have the equal powers for Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha. Now find out, going back to your parliament chapter, find out where Rajya Sabha has inferior powers to the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha has superior powers to that of the Lok Sabha. This is important because the questions will be repeated from this one only. So this is the thing. Whereas in USA, only one of the house, it can be only House of Representatives can initiate the impeachment process, but it is not the case with India. This is the difference. Then second important topic is pardoning power of governor. Recently, it was in the news because there was a pardoning case pending in Tamil Nadu, the Tamil Nadu governor. So that is the reason why this became very much important. So they can ask the pardoning power of governor and pardoning power of the president. What is the difference between these two pardoning powers? And what are the different pardoning powers which governor has, and what are the different pardoning powers which president has? This is also important coming to the polity chapter. So we have pardons, reprieves, respite, and remissions of punishment, or to suspend, remit, or commute the sentence of any person. This power is there with the governor. But what is the difference between president's pardoning power and governor's pardoning power is that president's pardoning power extends to the court martial also. Whenever the court, martial court, that is a military court, gives any judgment, then president can use his pardoning powers to lessen or to reduce or to commute the sentence of military court. But this power is not present with the governor. Why? Why this power is not present with the governor? Because president is the head of defense. President is the head of the defense. All commanding forces are answerable to the president at last. So he is the superior head of this defense forces. That is the reason why he has this power of ensuring using this pardoning power on military courts, sentence of the military courts. And the other difference is that president's power extends to the death sentence also, but governor's power do not extend to the death sentence. These are the two differences between pardoning power of the president and pardoning power of the governor. Very important. Again, this year I'm expecting this basic question from the in this year's UPSC. So these are the some of the definitions of what is pardon, what is commutation, what is remission, what is respite, and what is reprieve. So what is pardon? Absolves, convict from all sentences, punishments, and disqualifications. So this is a generalized pardon. Pardon absolves, that means completely reduces the convict from all sentences, punishments, and disqualification. Commutation, the actual English meaning of commutation means moving from one place to the other place. Moving from one place to other place. That means substitution from one punishment to the lighter punishment. That is called as commutation. Commuting means moving from one place to other place. So commutation means substitution from one punishment to the other punishment. So these things can be asked in the mass the following. What is what and what is not. Remission means reducing the period of sentence, but not its character is called as remission. Respite means less sentence. Res, I remembered it as less. Less fight. So less sentence in place of original sentence because of disability, or because of if they are women, or if they are pregnant. At that point of time, there is less sentence. So respite, read it as less fight. So less sentence. Then reprieve. Reprieve means temporary stay from the sentence. You are giving a temporary stay, whether it is a death sentence or whether it is any kind of sentence. You are giving a temporary stay such that the death sentence is not implemented on him. That is the meaning of this reprieve. So remember, pardon you can remember. Commutation, I said moving from one place to other place. So higher sentence to the lighter sentence is commutation. Respite, read it as less fight. So you will remember it as less sentence due to disability or some other reasons. So if you remember one or two, then you can eliminate the options easily. This is the main agenda. Then subcategorization of OBCs. Subcategorization of OBCs is very important, especially for the prelims and for the mains also. Why we need subcategorization of OBCs? Because in the OBCs, it is a wider community. 52% of the population in India are belong to the OBC community. So in 52%, you have only 27% reservation given to the OBCs, which is improportional. Whereas, what is the ST population in India? It is around 7.5%. So we have given 7.5% reservation to the STs. What is the SC reservation in India? 15%. So what is SC population in India? It is almost 15%. So we have given reservation as per the population percentage. But only for the OBCs, there is 52% of the population, but we have given only 27% of the reservation. So why we need subcategorization of OBCs? Because The reservation, the benefit of reservation is being taken by few communities in OBCs, the forward communities in OBCs rather than the backward communities in OBCs. Same subcategorization demand is there for SCs and STs also, but it is not implemented. And subcategorization of OBC is also not implemented at the center level. But in some states, subcategorization of OBC is implemented. For example, in Telangana state or AP state, you will see BCA, BCB, BCC, and BCD communities. So different kinds of reservations are there for different kinds of categories, especially in the state government. But in central government, OBC, it is considered as completely OBC list. So there are some demands that this subcategorization of OBCs should also be there for central government institutions and central government jobs also, to attain, to ensure that this reservation benefit is reached to the people to its best. To its best. That is the reason why we have this subcategorization of OBCs is there. So I'm explaining the background concept also so that you will remember for longer time. So for this subcategorization of OBCs, the central government has established this Justice G. Rohini committee to investigate on the conditions of OBCs in 2017. Why it is important? This particular Rohini committee was established to look into the subcategorization of OBCs. And why it is recent in the news? Because in 2020, as this committee has not given any report, they have extended the term of this committee to give the report in another 2 years. That is the reason why this is present in the news, and the questions can come from the subcategorization of OBCs. So what is important for the OBCs is, I have mentioned here, Kaka Kalekar committee is the first commission which was established to look into this socially and educationally, educationally backward communities. Kaka Kalekar Commission, which was established in 1953. Then after we have Mandal Commission, which said that 27% percentage reservation is required for socially and educationally backward communities, which are called as OBCs. Then there is Indira Sahani case in 1992, which says that creamy layer condition has been imposed through this Indira Sahani case, where who are economically forward, for them you have to keep the creamy layer condition. The reservation should not be applicable to this particular community. So annual income is 8 lakh, more than 8 lakh, they come under the creamy layer. There are certain conditions which are present in the Lakshmikant book. Please go back, go into the basics of this particular thing. If I am going to explain everything, then I can't cover the 50 probable topics. That is the reason why I'm saying you, please go back to the basic Lakshmikant books and read by yourself some extent. I am here to give the conceptual knowledge to you, not the factual knowledge. So all commissions, including Kaka Kalekar, Mandal Commission, and recently NCBC's report. NCBC is a constitutional body under which Constitutional Amendment Act? Which Constitutional Amendment Act? Important. 102nd Constitutional Amendment Act. NCBC is a constitutional body. It is no more a statutory body. It is a constitutional body. So NCBC report has also categorized OBCs into 3 categories. Extremely backward. So NCBC is a constitutional body under 102nd Constitutional Amendment Act. So NCBC report said that they have categorized OBCs into these three sections. That is EBCA, that is extremely backward classes, more backward classes, MBC, that is a group B, and backward classes, that is group C, comparatively forward among the OBCs. So this is how they have. So every committee, every commission has recommended for this subcategorization of the OBCs. And according to this NCBC report, 11 states have done this subcategorization. Among them, Telangana is one of the state. In Telangana, we have this subcategorization. The UPSC will not ask which state has this subcategorization of OBCs and which state doesn't have. They will give a statement that all the states in India have this subcategorization of OBCs, or none of the state have this subcategorization of OBCs. Like that, they will give the question. So this is important. Subcategorization of OBCs. Then Office of Profit. Office of Profit is very much important from past 4 to 5 years. Number one, because it is present in the news from 2016 when Aam Aadmi Party came into power, and there are some issues went into regarding Office of Profit in Delhi Assembly also. So why the controversy around this Office of Profit? Because it is not defined in the Constitution. What is the right definition? What is the actual definition for Office of Profit is no. In Supreme Court, in Pradeep Gordoi versus Swapan Roy, has given 4 broad principles where you can qualify certain offices also from. So in simple words, I will say any office, if you are an MP, you are an MP or MLA, you have to work for the people. So you are a public servant only. You are people's servant. But if you hold any office, for example, if you are holding an office, for example, film chambers. This Jaya Bachchan has shared this UP Film Chambers office. So when you are holding such kind of offices, film chambers offices, such kind of offices, there is a conflict of interest being you as a public servant and you being as a chairman of certain public sector company or certain private office. So what is the conflict? You will make certain policies which favors this office. That is the reason why you should not hold any office of profit. You should not hold any office of profit when you are an MP or MLA. That is the reason why the Supreme Court has given 4 broad guidelines, which defines in a broader sense, which comes under the office of profit, which doesn't come under the office of profit. Says other of that office. For example, government has any role in appointing the members of that office, then it comes under the office of profit. If you are holding that office, then you are holding office of profit. Whether the office has any remuneration attached to it. For example, you are an MP and you are member of that office also, and that office gives certain salary to you. Then also you are holding this. Okay, so office has some government powers, and other major broad that they have said is that way of patronage. So if all this say that there is a conflict of interest between you as a public servant and you as a holding an office of profit. This was given by Supreme Court, and in simple form, in Jaya Bachchan case, it said that whether to qualify an office as an office of profit, then you should ask a basic question that whether the MP or MLA has any monetary gain. Is he gaining anything from this particular office? If he is gaining, then it comes under the office of profit. If he is not gaining, it doesn't come under the office of profit. This is all about office of profit. Nothing important more than this. If they have to ask, until now they did not ask. If they have to ask, they will ask very simple question: whether it is defined in the office of constitution, in the constitution or not, or which qualifies under the office of profit. By common sense only, you can say. Okay, then this, if you are holding office of profit, then you are disqualified from being an MP or MLA. If you are holding, then you are disqualified from being an MP or MLA. So here I wanted to say Article 102 and Article 191 gives the constitutional provisions relating to disqualification of a member as an MP or as an MLA. Another thing is that 10th schedule of the Constitution. 10th schedule of the Constitution also talks about this disqualification. Okay, just look into this 10th schedule and these constitutional provisions. Then Article 370. Article 370 is also important because last year they did not ask any question on Article 370. So this year they may ask abrogation of Article 370 and 35A. So Article 370 relates to, or there are certain provisions in Constitution which gives special provisions for certain states, which comes under these things. So basic difference between Article 370 and Article 35 is that Article 370 is the temporary provisions with respect to Jammu and Kashmir to have its own constitution. So until before last year, you have a separate constitution for the Jammu and Kashmir. But before last year, they have abrogated this Article 370 and 35A. From then, we don't have this Article 370 and 35A. And 35A defines who are the permanent residents of the state and what are their special rights and what are their special privileges. These things are being defined in Article 35A. Now, these two things are not there in the Constitution. They're abrogated. So what is the implication? They will ask, the basic question only they will ask, but if they ask about the implication, then you can say there is no separate flag presently. Previously, they used to have separate flag. Complete applicability of Indian Constitution to Jammu and Kashmir, replacing Ranbir Penal Code with that of the IPC, which is India is following IPC. IPC was not applicable to Jammu and Kashmir before last year. So now it is applicable. And people from other states can buy property in Jammu and Kashmir. But recently also it was in the news that not all, there are certain limitations also in this. Limitations. Complete freedom is not given. Anil Ambani or Dhirubhai Ambani or Mukesh Ambani cannot go to Jammu and Kashmir and buy the land. There are certain limitations to them. not much important for the prelims examination, but just know it. Then RTI is applicable to the state. These things are implications of abrogation of Article 370 and Article 35A. Interstate Council, whether Interstate Council is a constitutional body or statutory body. Someone is saying statutory body, someone is saying constitutional body. So when was it implemented? When was it inserted into the constitution? If it is inserted into the constitution, for example, in 1949, from 1949, it is constitution is enacted. It is applicable. So if it is not there from 1940s, then why we don't have 263A? For example, if you see GST Council, then there is this kind of alphabets are attached to the article numbers. Why there is no 263A to this Interstate Council? It is from 1990, set up by the presidential order under Article 263 from 1990. Why we don't have this insertion under Article 263A? Separate new article was not, why it was not added into the constitution? The president order, and he has set up this Interstate Council under Article 263 to ensure better coordination between the states. That is the reason why we don't have this 263A or this thing. It is a constitutional body. It is not a statutory body. There is no statute present which gives powers to the Interstate Council. So it is higher body. It is a constitutional body. But why it is not mentioned in constitutional bodies in Lakshmikant? Why it is given separately in separate section? Why it is not inserted in the constitutional bodies? It is not a permanent body. Whenever the need arises to the government, they will constitute this Interstate Council to ensure better coordination among the states. Hence, similar to the Finance Commission, it is not a permanent body. It is reconstituted at every interval when the need arises. Finance Commission is reconstituted every 5 years, but Interstate Council is reconstituted whenever there is a need. So these things are, this conceptual knowledge is important for the Interstate Council, and it is a recommendatory body. It is a recommendatory body. The recommendation given by this council is not binding on the states. It is to promote coordination among the states, and the chairperson of this Interstate Council is the PM. Okay, and it has CMs of all the states and administrators of the UTs. In certain states, if the governor is if it is in the governor's role, then governor will become part of this Interstate Council, and there are 6 central cabinet ministers are also part of this Interstate Council. So remember, if they have to ask the question, they will ask PM is the chairperson, or CM is the chairperson, or Home Minister is the chairperson. Apart from this Interstate Council, there is standing committee of ISC. Standing committee means whenever there is a small issue between some states, not all the states, then they will form a standing committee to resolve the issues. So this standing committee is chaired by the Home Minister. It has 5 cabinet ministers and it has 9 CMs of the state. So it is a smaller body which is always standing and which is taking the decisions in favor of this ISC, that is the Interstate Council. So remember the difference. Interstate Council is headed by the PM and the standing committee of ISC is headed by the Home Minister. Don't get confused if the question comes in the examination. Interstate Council is very important this year because it was recently reconstituted again to resolve the disputes between Maharashtra and Karnataka, the border disputes between Maharashtra and Karnataka. Okay. Then this aspirational districts program. Why I have chosen this question is that this particular topic is that UPSC has the habit of making the mains questions a prelims question. In the mains, they will ask some questions, some important on certain important schemes like Jal Jeevan Mission. They have asked in 2018 or 2019, and aspirational districts program also they have asked in the previous year mains UPSC. So they have this habit of picking the questions from the mains and asking in the preliminary examinations. So this aspirational districts program was asked in 2018. So that is the reason chosen this particular topic, aspirational districts program. So this aspirational districts. So the name itself says there are certain districts which are aspiring to develop. So central government has chosen certain districts to develop these districts for better social and economic development. So this was launched in 2018, Jan 2018, to accelerate the development especially in the social and economic indicators in most underdeveloped districts. So they have selected 112 districts out of 739 districts in the country, and they are trying to develop these districts. Most underdeveloped districts they have taken and they are trying to develop. So this most underdeveloped is also important for the prelims. Okay, these are the three ideas: moving beyond economic measures of success, enabling equitable regional development, and driving change through cooperative and competitive federalism. These are on based on these three ideas. They are developing these districts from underdeveloped stage to the developed stage. And here there are three ideas, and three level monitoring is there. Three levels are there. So what is at the central level? Niti Aayog monitors the development of these districts, and at the state level, respective chief secretaries are responsible for development of these districts, and at the district officer of rank joint or additional secretary to look into the development of these districts. The three districts program is convergence, collaboration, and competition. So everything is three in this aspirational districts program: A, D, P. So three letters are there. So everything is three. Remember, they will ask simple questions only if they have to ask in this aspirational districts program. They will ask all the districts are covered under this aspirational districts program. No, it is not right. Then investigating charges against the Supreme Court judge. This is also very much important because the present CM of AP has been complaining about one of the judge of the Supreme Court about his misbehavior, and he's not favoring the AP state on all these things. He was complaining. So this Supreme Court judge is also important. As I have already said, Parliament chapter, Supreme Court chapter are very much important in the central government. Please go through it. So these are the certain things how Supreme Court judge is being removed. Till now, any of the Supreme Court judge is being impeached. The impeachment process has been initiated, but he was not impeached. Okay, impeachment process has been initiated. Who was the chief justice? Who was the judge who was on whom the impeachment process has been initiated? But impeachment process has been initiated, but it was not completed. Before completion of that impeachment process, he resigned from that judge position. So impeachment process was not successful. Until now, we don't have any impeachment process for the president. No president has been impeached until now, and no Supreme Court judge has been impeached until now. So these are the certain facts which are important for the prelims. For impeachment, it should be signed at least by 100 members in Lok Sabha and 50 members in Rajya Sabha on misbehavior or incapacity of the judge. And for the impeachment of President of India, what is the condition? What is the condition? Misbehavior of the president is there. The impeachment of the president is there. Misbehavior of the president, is that a condition for impeachment of the president? For the president, there is only one condition, that is violation of the constitution. Violation of the constitution is only condition under which you can impeach the president. But for the certain constitutional bodies chairpersons and Supreme Court judges, you have this misbehavior, incapacity of the judge, or for example, he is financially insolvent. All these things are there, where you can raise the impeachment process against him. So there is a presiding officers of the relevant house is there who will initiate this impeachment procedure, and preliminary inquiry by 3-member committee is there, which is this committee consists of Supreme Court judge, Chief Justice of the High Court, and distinguished jurist is there. 3-member committee is there, which looks into this preliminary inquiry of certain judge. And if the report, based on that report, will be submitted to the presiding officer of the House, and the House goes for the voting. What is the majority required? What is the majority required? It is a simple majority or special majority. Again, the special majority which is required. Go back to your Supreme Court chapter and see what kind of majority is required. Then there is in-house procedure. If there is any kind of misbehavior is there inside the court, or the person inside the court is complaining, complain to CJI, or if the CJI himself is misbehaving, then you can complain to the President of India. So again, a committee, in-house committee will be formed, consisting of judge of Supreme Court or 2 chief judges of other high courts. And there is sexual harassment cases also there, which can be filed by women, and there is internal complaints committee will be always there in any public office. So this is gender sensitization internal complaints committee is there. We can file in this committee, and this committee consists of majority of women members only, and certain members of the Supreme Court judges are also there. So majority should be women members. So this is the difference. So 3 investigating charges, that is under normal removal, in-house procedures is there, and sexual harassment also, we can remove the Supreme Court judge. So Supreme Court became again important this year. Then E-Lok Adalat. E-Lok Adalat, because of the COVID reason only, we have this E-Lok Adalat, because People can't come to the adalats and they can't sit. That is the reason why we have certain states have come out with this innovative policy, that is e-lok adalats. This e-lok adalat is not important, but lok adalat is important. So Lok Adalat is Lok, the name itself says People's Court. People's Court means it is not, it do not follow the actual procedure which courts follow. It follows a different procedure. No need to have any lawyer who is representing you, or you both the parties can sit together with the judge, okay, and you can discuss the problems and judge will give the judgment. Okay, that is the reason why it is called as alternate dispute resolution redressal mechanism, ADR. In ADR, this Lok Adalat comes under the ADR. So this Lok Adalat is a statutory body under Legal Services Authorities Act 1987. Statutory body, it is not a constitutional body, it is a statutory body. And its main reason is that there are many cases which are civil in nature. That is, for example, marriage issues are there, which is a civil case. Land issue is there, which is a civil case. Generally, property issues are there, which are civil cases. In the courts, around 3.3 crore cases are pending in various stages in the courts. Among them, majority cases are civil cases only. And most of the civil cases are similar in nature. Like land issue is there. Similar land issues are there in various cases. So what this Lok Adalat will do is that they will clump all these cases and they will give judgment at one point of time, so that number of cases will be reduced. So this main intention of this Lok Adalat is to reduce the burden on the normal courts. That is the reason why we have formed these Lok Adalats. And these awards are deemed to be the decree of the civil court. It has the power of the civil court. And these awards are final and binding on all persons. And no appeal can be made against this in any court. So as you people are sitting together with the judge and you are discussing your problems, so you cannot appeal. Both the parties have been accepting have to accept the decision given by the judge. Otherwise, judge will not give any decision. You people are sitting together and you are negotiating. Your conciliation process is going on. All these things are going on. That is the reason why you can't appeal to the higher courts if you are not satisfied with this kind of judgment. So that is the reason why it is final and it is binding on all parties who are part of this. So there are 4 mechanisms of this ADRMs, that is alternate dispute resolution mechanisms. One is arbitration, negotiation, conciliation, and mediation. This also can be asked in the match the following. So arbitration means which is binding on the arbiter, binding on both the parties who are choosing for this arbitration procedure, and there will be one arbiter. For example, in the case of India and Pakistan, there is Indus Water Treaty, which World Bank has arbitrated. So which is binding on both the parties. Okay, World Bank has been. This is alternative dispute resolution mechanism, and it is one of the successful dispute resolution mechanism. Even though we have many ceasefire violations, we did not violate this Indus Water Treaty until now. So this alternate dispute resolution mechanism is one of the effective mechanism to resolve the disputes, to redress the grievances. So this is one of the arbitration, and it is binding. So similar is that mediation. In the mediation also, there is a kind of mediator will be there who will ensure this problem solving. This is called as facilitated negotiation. Negotiation means, for example, if you go to any business, any shop, then you will negotiate for the price, and it is up to the seller and up to the buyer to accept the price or not. So negotiation is a voluntary agreement, whereas arbitration is a binding agreement, binding on both the parties. And conciliation means he will explain, this is the law, conciliator is there, he will explain this particular law is there, and the things will go according to the law. And in the conciliation also, it is not binding on the parties. Only thing which is binding is arbitration, which is binding in the alternate dispute resolution mechanisms. Nothing is binding. So this is about alternate dispute resolution mechanisms, which is important. Lok Adalat is important this time. I am expecting this question from 2014, Lok Adalats. Next, direct democracy. Recently, you can see that if you have attended my previous sessions of yesterday and day before yesterday, there are certain questions on direct democracy. So direct democracy is also important. They can ask which comes under the direct democracy, which doesn't come under the direct democracy. So recently it was in the news because Haryana Panchayat Raj Act has said that there is direct democracy principle they are implementing at the panchayat level, panchayat Raj institutions, to recall the members who are not functioning properly. So there are four direct democracy things: right to recall, referendum, initiative, and plebiscite. So right to recall means electorate. That means people who elect the representatives has the power to remove the elected officials before expiry of the term. Before the expiry, you can remove that particular person who is not functioning properly. That is called as a recall. You are recalling him. Then referendum. Referendum means directly people are voting on certain specific political, constitutional, or legislative issue, and this referendum is binding on the government. Whatever people vote in this particular referendum is binding on the uh, government. They have to follow. That is the reason why, if you see in the previous years, Jammu and Kashmir, Pakistan especially asking for referendum in Jammu and Kashmir, but India was not accepting. So because India, if they go for referendum, then India has to, it is binding on Indian government to implement whatever the decision it is. Okay, this is called as referendum. Then there is initiative. Initiative means initiation. Initiation means, for example, we have elected people's representatives, and people representatives will present any bill if it has some public importance. So instead of people's representatives, people themselves are saying that please take this action, or please implement, please introduce this particular bill. If people are taking the initiative, that is called as initiative. Allows electorate to vote on constitutional or legislative measure proposed by the people. People will propose a certain bill and they will only vote, not the people's representatives sitting in the parliament will vote. So this is called as initiative. And plebiscite, it is similar to the referendum, but this is not binding on the government. So referendum and plebiscite are similar, but it is not binding. So initiative is people are taking the initiative. Recall means you can recall the public representative if he is not functioning properly. Referendum and plebiscite are to some extent similar in nature. Then there is star campaigners in election. This is also one of the important thing. If they have to give you bouncers, then they can give this kind of bouncer questions also. So star campaigners are those campaigners of the political parties who can campaign for the political party. Not all people present in the political party are star campaigners. They can only select certain few campaigners as the star campaigners because there will be certain economic freedom or expenditure freedom is there. Expenditure freedom is there on these star campaigners. That is the reason why these star campaigners are important. For example, Amit Shah is a star campaigner for the BJP party. Or certain central ministers are also there for the star campaigners. So these star campaigners is decided by the election commission. They have to apply to the election commission who will be the star campaigners from my particular party. That is what the star campaigners means, not by the Bollywood stars or Hollywood stars or Tollywood stars. Okay, recently they have made certain changes for recognized national parties and state political parties. Star campaigners will be 30 only, not 40. Initially it was 40, but now it is 30. And for unrecognized or just registered, unrecognized registered political parties, star campaigners will be only 50, not 20. Okay, and period of submission for the list of star campaigners to the political party will be has extended from 7 days to 10 days before the notice of the election. Notice of election is there. When election commission gives a notice, model code of conduct will be implemented from then. Code of conduct will be implemented from that point of time. From that day, before 1 week, they have to give the list of the star campaigners. Initially it was 7 days. Now they have extended that period to 10 days. Not much important, but I'm expecting this question also, because if they have to give the bouncers, they can give this kind of bouncer questions to you. Who are star campaigners and all these things. Then Right to Information Act. Right to Information Act is very important because it is being asked in the mains examination from past 2 years. NEP is also important, National Education Policy. Please go back to your current affairs book and read about this NEP. NEP has in the 2020 question paper of mains, it was asked more than 3 times. In ethics, they have asked 2 times. In polity, they have in paper 2, they have asked 1 time. So 3 to 4 times they have asked this national education policy. So national education policy also is also important from the prelims perspective. So right to information, what we have to read in the right to information is that what are the recent amendments to this Right to Information Act? Right to information, is it a fundamental right or statutory right? Yes, it is a fundamental right. Right to information, you can, yes, you can say it as a fundamental right, because our freedom of expression doesn't mean that if you don't have proper information, we can't express properly. We can't express to our fullest potential. That is the reason why right to information qualifies under Article 19 of the Constitution, fundamental rights. Yes, so if the question comes, constitutional right, legal right, fundamental right, this kind of question comes, it is a fundamental right. It has upgraded to the fundamental right. Okay. And then what are the important changes only I have given here? Removal of fixed term. There was fixed term of 5 years initially, but this 5 years term was removed in the recent amendment of 2019. Then salaries of this CIC, that is Chief Information Commissioners and Information Commissioners, initially were equivalent to CECs and ECs. CECs and ECs, that is Chief Election Commissioner and Election Commissioners. But now, through the amendment, they said that the salaries, allowances, and other terms of CICs and SCs, ICs will be determined by central government. So they came under the ambit of the central government. So as per the whims and fancies of central government, they will change the salaries and allowances. If right to information, for example, there is always a kind of political pressure upon these kind of institutions. If they come, so this is the thing, and you can infer one of the important statement from this kind of amendments is that the amendment did not strengthen the RTI Act 2005, but it made the RTI and CICs and ICs in control of the central government. That's why this criticism was there. So these are the important amendments. They will not go beyond these amendments. So please look into these amendments again. Then CIC is appointed by the president, even though it is a statutory body. Even though it is a statutory body, he was appointed by the president. And there were, on the recommendation of the committee, that is PM, Leader of Opposition, and Union Cabinet Minister, nominated by the PM. Generally, the information and broadcasting minister will be the nominated by the PM, but it is up to the PM to nominate any kind of minister into this committee. And one more important thing for this CICs and ICs is that these ICs and CICs are not eligible for reappointment. Once he is a CIC, he is not eligible for the reappointment. He has to leave this organization and go somewhere else. Same IC can be promoted to the CIC, but once he is the IC, he cannot be appointed as IC again, Information Commission again. So this is important regarding Right to Information Act 2019 amendment. Similar is one of the important act is that Foreign Contribution Amendment Act, FCRA. What is this FCRA? FCRA is to regulate the foreign contribution. We are regulating. Initially, it was FEMA was there, so not FEMA. FEMA is different and FERA is different. So foreign contribution is there. For example, around 10 years back, the former Prime Minister of India has said that there is a lot of foreign contribution to certain NGOs which are disturbing the democratic development of India. For example, Greenpeace organization is there. This particular NGO is there, which is getting huge foreign contributions, and it is curbing the development of India. It is making the protests for the if we are planning to set up any nuclear power plant, especially in Kudankulam, it was backed by this Greenpeace organization only. That is the reason why he said that foreign contributions are not positive to the development of India, but they are creating more hurdles for the development of India. To some extent, they are good only because our forex reserves will increase. Our forex reserve will increase, and the dollar rupee difference will not be much high if we get more foreign contribution in terms of dollars or pounds. But to some extent, this particular money is being used for protests, or this particular money is being used for certain other purposes, which is not ensuring the development of the country. That is the reason why we are regulating these foreign contributions. So what is FCRA is that bought to regulate the flow of foreign funds to these voluntary organizations and this is regulated by MHA, that is Minister of Home Affairs, not Minister of Finance, because this money is going to the certain terrorist organizations also, or this money is going to certain protesters who are limiting the development of the country. For example, the CA Citizenship Amendment Bill, people felt that there is certain foreign contribution is there who are giving money to these protesters, and they are making this protest completely perennial, years and years. So that is the reason why this is being controlled by MHA, not Minister of Finance. Even though it is related to the finance related thing, it is not under the Minister of Finance. It is under the Minister of Home Affairs only. So what comes under the foreign contribution? It may be currency, it may be security, or it can be any article by the foreign resource. It's called as foreign contribution. So major amendments they said is that they have tightened this foreign contribution to the NGOs. They have tightened the foreign contributions to these NGOs. So how they have tightened? This amendment has added new public servant. They have added, initially public servant was not part of this FCRA, but they have added the public servant also into this list of persons like election who are contesting in the elections, newspaper editors, judges were there in this list who should not get any foreign contribution. But now the public servant is also part of this list, and Aadhaar, passport, and overseas citizenship identity card is also mandatory for the registration of this NGO in India. Then FCRA account should be only with SBI, not with any other branch, any other bank. So SBI and New Delhi branch only. So they are trying to effectively regulate this foreign contribution to use this foreign money in a just manner. And the renewal of license within 6 months of the expiration is there. This is also newly added. And not more than 50% of the contribution from the foreign resources should be used for administrative expenses. So not more than less than 50% only should be used for administrative expenses. What comes under administrative expenses? Like salaries, maintenance of the NGO, these things only. Rest, more than 50% of the money should be used for the development of the country, not for the administrative expenses like salaries. They're setting up an NGO and they're getting a lot of foreign contribution, and they're taking the salaries, huge amount of salaries. This is not creating any benefit for the country. Why we have given permission for setting up of an NGO or NPO? There is nothing used, right? If they are using more than 50% of the money for salaries and maintenance of the office, that is the reason why they have tightened this FCRA regulations. Now, government may suspend the registration of the person for more than 180 days. So initially it is less than 180 days they can suspend. Now they have increased it to more than 180 days. So these are the important provisions which are present in this particular amendment. So this FCRA is also important. Please look into this. Then betting in India. I was expecting this question. Betting comes under central list or state list or concurrent list. It comes under the state list. It doesn't come under the central list. For example, playing this rummy, circle, or some kind of online games are there, which is banned in certain states. If you are playing, being in that state, if your mobile registration is there in that state, then you will be punished. So that is the reason why betting is present in the state list 2 of the 7th schedule. It is not present in the list 1 or list 3. Okay, and in the recent times we don't have any legislation which is related to this betting. In 1867, Public Gambling Act was there. Still we are following same kind of act. So this you can say as colonial hangover. Still we are following the same kind of colonial act to regulate this kind of betting. And these are some of the things which I have used: game of skill, game of chance. It has distinction between game of skill and game of chance. And certain, even though it comes under the betting, but certain games are omitted from the gambling, like betting in the horse race, lotteries, game of skills. These are omitted from the gambling legislation. And Sikkim and Nagaland have officially permitted for online gambling. But in Telangana, it has zero tolerance policy. And Justice Lodha Committee which this committee was also established for BCCI reforms. And during that time, Justice Lodha committee said that legalize the betting. When you are getting a lot of income, you can tax this betting and you can get a lot of income to the government. So legalize the betting and take the money. It will increase the revenues. It will decrease the fiscal deficit of the government. This kind of suggestion is given by Justice Lodha committee, but we haven't legalized the betting until now. So if the question comes, they can ask Justice Lodha committee has advocated for the legalized betting or not. So this is all about betting. I am expecting this list too. Is important. It comes in the state list, and it is Justice Lodha committee advocated for legalizing the betting. Then National Recruitment Agency. This is also important. National Recruitment Agency is like, for example, now we are going with one nation, one election, one ration card, one nation, one ration card. Okay, one nation, one language. These kind of things are going on in the country. So similarly, in the same in a manner, in the same lines, we have this National Recruitment Agency, that is one nation, one exam for the government services, especially non-gazetted posts. Non-gazetted post. Common entrance test through this National Recruitment Agency they are planning to conduct. This reduces confusion to the people. Okay, this National Recruitment Agency is not for the gazetted posts. It is only for the non-gazetted posts. The main advantage is that you can pay only one fee. No need to pay fee for banking exams, fee for SSC exams, fee for RRB recruitment. No need of this. One test, one fee, one exam. These kind of things. So this is the advantage of this thing, and it is registered under Societies Registration Act. Cabinet has approved for this National Recruitment Agency, and it is headed by Secretary of the Government of India. And what kind of exams come under this National Recruitment Agency is that Minister of Railways, who are the representatives of this is Minister of Railways, Minister of Finance is there, SSC representative from SSC will be there, that is Staff Selection Commission, representative from RRB, that is Railway Recruitment Board, and representative from IBPS, banking exams. Okay, all these representatives are part of this National Recruitment Agency. And what kind of examinations they will conduct? They will, common entrance test will be conducted for 3 agencies, that is Railway Recruitment Board, IBPS, that is banking exams, and SSC, Staff Selection Commission. Only for these 3 examinations will be done, and that too non-gazetted posts only, not gazetted posts. Okay, and it will be conducted twice in a year. Twice in a year for graduate level, 12th pass and 10th pass. And the score which we get is valid for 3 years. These are the factual parts of this National Recruitment Agency. I'm expecting this question this year. Then National Human Rights Commission. National Human Rights Commission is also important because amendment has been done in 2019. So they will not ask in that year, but they will ask after 1 or 2 years when people tend to forget about this organization. So National Human Rights Commission is a statutory body which has the powers of the civil court. Okay, which has the powers of the civil court. And what are the recently amended in 2019? What are the amendments is that initially CJI, former Chief Justice of India, is only the chairperson of this National Human Rights Commission, but now they have amended it to either it can be CJI or it can be Judge of Supreme Court, former Judge of Supreme Court or former CJI of the Supreme Court. And at least one should be the woman representative in this NHRC composition. And initially there was members from NCSC, NCST, BC members were not there, but now they have included this NCBC member should be there, NCPCR, that is Protection of Child Rights member should be there, and Chief Commissioner of Persons with Disabilities. So they have expanded the composition. Of this NHRC. This is important, and they reduced the term of this NHRC, these members, from 5 years to 3 years. Earlier it is 5 years, now it is only 3 years. So these are the changes which have been done to NHRC through Amendment Act 2019. Then Aadhaar is also very much important. I'm expecting this question because question was not much detailedly asked regarding this Aadhaar. Aadhaar is issued by UIDAI. UIDAI is a statutory body. The statutory body under Aadhaar Act 2016. And this, why it is in the news? Because there was a plea recently. Supreme Court dismissed the plea seeking the review of this act, Aadhaar Act 2016. Okay, that is the reason why you have this. This is present in the news. So I am expecting the question from Aadhaar Act also. So it is a 12-digit identification number, not 16-digit or 8-digit. Please remember your Aadhaar number so that you can mark one bit correct. And in which cases it is mandatory and which cases it is not mandatory is also important. It is mandatory for income tax returns and PAN allotment, and it is also mandatory for availing facilities of welfare schemes and government subsidies. Like, for example, food subsidies is there. It is mandatory for these things only, but it is not mandatory for bank account, and it is not mandatory for uh, 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 any company for employee. If they are giving any employment, they cannot ask your Aadhaar identification number. They can ask for Aadhaar identification number. If they can't mandatorily ask for Aadhaar identification. If you are not giving Aadhaar, then they cannot reject your employment in the company. Okay, but what banks will do? Bank will again and again ask Aadhaar identification, Aadhaar number. So you tend to give it. Okay, this is important. So where it is mandatory and where it is not mandatory. So, and one of the important thing is that Aadhaar bill was passed as a money bill under Article 110(1) of the Constitution. It is passed as a money bill. That is the reason why they have again sent a plea to the Supreme Court. Please repeal this Aadhaar Act, because it is passed as a money bill. It is not a money bill, but it is passed as a money bill. So who has the final authority to decide whether this particular bill is money bill or this particular bill is not a money bill? Who has this authority?
Speaker.
Speaker of
Lok Sabha.
Lok Sabha, and he has the final authority. At that point of time, Venkaiah Naidu, if you have listened to that discussions at that point of time, Venkaiah Naidu has said that Speaker has said it is a money bill, so it is a money bill. We have to pass it as a money bill only. So Rajya Sabha has less powers to amend this Aadhaar Act. That is the reason why at that point of time it was a huge controversy. How can you pass this Aadhaar bill as a money bill? But government has given the reason that this Aadhaar can be useful for welfare schemes and government subsidies, so we can reduce the fiscal deficit and revenue deficit of the government. That is the reason why we are passing it as a money bill. That was the reason said by the government. So it is still a controversy. So to bypass the discussions in the Rajya Sabha, they are making any bill as a money bill. That was the discussion. Then these are the things which are present in the Aadhaar: name, age, gender, and address. Apart from this, biometric data and virtual ID is present. Okay, this is all about Aadhaar. Aadhaar is not a citizenship. Okay, it is not a citizenship status. It is not a citizenship status. So if the question comes, it is wrong. Okay, Aadhaar is just an other identification card which you have, along with election ID, voter ID card, PAN card, driving license. With all these things, you have Aadhaar card. Next, Mission Karma Yogi. Mission Karma Yogi, I am expecting the question. It's a very simple question they will ask. Like, what is this Mission Karma Yogi? It is to ensure capacity building of civil services capacity building. So higher level officers, that is officers like who are recruited through UPSC or any other gazetted posts come under the civil services. So to increase the capacity building means their knowledge, improvement of their knowledge. This is called as Mission Karma Yogi. So the core principles of this Mission Karma Yogi is a civil servant should not work on the basis of rules based, but he should work as per the roles based, not rule based but role based. And there should be importance is given to on-site learning rather than bookish learning. That is the reason why, see, presently I came for OJT, that is on-job training. So this is on-site learning only for me. So I'm going daily to the division, my own division, and I'm learning from the site. So this is a kind of a core principle of Mission Karma Yogi. Then strengthening behavior, functional, and domain expertise of these civil servants, because these civil servants are there for execution and policy making level. At the higher level, these people will be there. That is the reason why their behavior is important, their functional and their domain expertise is also important. So Mission Karma Yogi, simply you remember, it is for capacity building of civil servants. So there is iGOT portal, government online training portal. Karma Yogi platform is there, which gives the e-learning material for capacity building of the civil servants. And there is PM's Human Resource Council is there to enhance the capacity building, which is chaired by the PM himself. PM himself is chairing this Human Resources Council for Civil Servants because it is for the officer level people, so it should be chaired by PM only. Okay, who is the chairperson of this Civil Services Board? Yesterday we have discussed from the previous year previous year questions, and look into this. It is a cabinet secretary, not PM or not HM. Okay, so these are the other people who are part of this Human Resource Council of the PM's Public Human Resource Council. That is selected union ministers, CMs, eminent public HR practitioners, and public service functionaries are there. Then there is CRPC and IPC, which is also important because recently there is sedition law is also there under Article 124, not Article, Section 124A of the IPC. There are certain cases on this. So what is the difference between IPC and CRPC is important. So it determines the definition of the crime. IPC just determines the definition of the crime, whereas CRPC deals about procedure for the regulation of the criminal law. It was drafted in 1860, but it was drafted in 1882, and it was enacted in 1973 in independent India. And this was drafted by first LCA, that is first Law Commission of India, headed by Macaulay. Okay. So this both IPC and CRPC will be reviewed at periodic intervals by this Bureau of Police Research, not Policy Research, Police Research and Development, because police have to implement this IPC and CRPC. For example, if you are selected to this IPS, then you have to read this IPC and CRPC. Both IAS and IPS have to read this CRPC and IPC. They will give certain training to this IPC and CRPC. This is important. So it is BBRD, that is Bureau of Police Research and Development, set up in 1970 under the Minister of Home Affairs. This is the thing. Then Data Governance Quality Index. Don't confuse with the name. This data governance is to assess the performance of ministries and departments, how they are functioning, whether it is not related to the governance, but how these central sector schemes and central sponsored schemes are implemented properly. This is the main aim of this survey, Data Governance Quality Index Survey. This survey is conducted by Development Monitoring Evaluation Office, DMEO, under NITI Aayog. So NITI Aayog is directly responsible for this Data Governance Quality Index Survey, okay, which looks into the effective implementation of the central sponsored schemes and central sector schemes. So this survey consists of data generation, data quality, use of technology, data analysis, and data security is there. Nothing much important. They will ask whether it comes under NITI Aayog or what are the things. Based on the name only, you can say Data Governance Quality Index. So how, in what quality these kind of schemes are being implemented. Then next, National Program and Project Management Policy Framework. So this is program and project management. What kind of programs? What kind of programs and projects? That is infrastructure. Infrastructural programs and projects are being looked. The quality of these projects and the quality of these programs is looked through this National Program Project Management Policy Framework. This is jointly launched by this NITI Aayog and Quality Council of India. Yesterday we have seen in the previous year questions about Quality Council of India. So this policy framework, this policy framework is jointly launched by NITI Aayog and QCI. It is basically for infrastructure development, especially the physical infrastructure, not social infrastructure. Physical infrastructure means railway infrastructure, which you can touch physically, like railway infrastructure, road infrastructure. All these things comes under physical infrastructure. Social infrastructure means health and education. Health and education comes under the social infrastructure. Governance, all these things come under the social infrastructure. So this NITI Aayog, when it has a link with QCI, Quality Council of India. If you see the head office of this Quality Council of India, it is present in Engineers Building in New Delhi. Not important for the UPSC, but for remembering, I'm saying Engineers Building. In New Delhi, there is Engineers Building. Their head office is present in this Engineers Building. So engineers are responsible for construction. So construction means infrastructure. Infrastructure means which kind of infrastructure? Physical infrastructure. That is how you have to remember. Then it envisages for radical reforms in the infrastructure projects and helps in developing good quality infrastructure, robust governance, and reduces cost and waste management. All these things they will see in this National Program and Project Management Policy Framework. Then Public Affairs Index, PAI, which gives ranks to the states on based on the governance, based on the how well particular governance is there in particular state. Based on that, this Public Affairs Index gives the ranks. It is not by Niti Aayog, it is by non-profit organization, that is Public Affairs Center is there. So if they have to ask the out-of-box questions, they can ask this kind of indices, important indices only, which you get confused. Those kind of indices only I'm discussing, not every indices. And in this, while they are analyzing, they will analyze, especially in the context of sustainable development, whether sustainable development is being properly followed or not. They will check in it. So in among the larger states, Kerala has topped, and among the smaller state, Bihar, among the larger state, Bihar has is bottom. So these facts are not important. Okay, don't worry about this. Just remember this first fact. Among the states, Kerala is top. Even if you don't know, generally South Indian states will be the top. Okay. Next, Urban Governance Index. This Urban Governance Index also, don't confuse that this is given by Niti Aayog. There is one index, that is Devolution Index. Remember who gives this Devolution Index? Finance Commission. Go to Niti Aayog website and find out today's homework. Find out what all indices which is given by Niti Aayog. Okay, just mug it up. It will be useful for elimination. It will be useful for elimination. So this Urban Governance Index, which ranks the states in terms of real empowerment at the grassroots democracy. Urban governance means municipal commissions, etc. So city governance, so grassroots democracy and local self-government. So this index is given by Praja Foundation. Praja means people. So there was a question in, for remembering only I'm saying, there was a question in UPSC that what matters is that development at the local level, not at the state level or not at the central level. Effective governance, people judge the development based on the effectiveness of local government only, not central government or state government. So for example, for a person who is living in a district, he can approach a district collector only. He can't approach CM of the state. So that is the reason why local government is very much important. So for the people, local government is important. Just remember Praja Foundation. This is given by Praja Foundation because people's development depends upon the local government. So the top state here is Odisha and bottom state is Manipur and Nagaland. And this index has said that no state, for example, there is central list, state list, and local list and concurrent list. It said that there is local list. There should be local list also. This list consists of should be consists of all the subjects which are effectively implemented at the local level by local self-governments. So as per the 11th and 12th schedule, they have said that certain functions should be devolved to the local governments who are very much effective in implementing it. But no state has devolved completely 18 functions to the city governments. That was the report given by this index, Urban Governance, which is given by the Praja Foundation. Okay. Then 5-star villages. This may confuse you in the examination. That's why I have taken 5-star village. Is this particular scheme is launched by India Post. Why it has launched? Because post offices in India are not just there to carry your couriers or carry your posts from one place to other place. They play a vital role in the development of the country through their developmental schemes like savings bank account, Sukanya Samriddhi accounts, postal life insurance policies, rural postal life insurance policies. So they have a very huge role in what is that we say? They have a huge role in financial decentralization, or a huge role in yesterday we have seen a very good term. What is that? Inclusion, financial inclusion. They play very role in very good role in the development. That is the reason why this India Post has launched this 5-star villages. For example, there are certain schemes, 5 to 6 schemes, which Indian post offices implemented at the local level. Like Sukanya Samriddhi account is managed by the post office only. So based on number of schemes which are implemented in the village level, they will rate the village. For example, if 3 of the schemes are implemented, then it is called as 3-star rating village. If 4 schemes are implemented effectively in that village by the panchayat offices or gram sabhas, then it is called as 4-star village. If all the schemes are implemented, which are initiated by the post office at the local level by the gram panchayats, then it is called as 5-star village. So don't confuse it with the Minister of Tourism that having 5-star facilities in the villages. Confusing in nature. That's why I have taken this particular thing. Then sedition law. Sedition law is also important, which I have already discussed. Recently, also many people are filing case that constitutional validity of the sedition law should be abrogated or they should be cancelled out. Sedition law should not be there in IPC. But Supreme Court again and again said that sedition law is a need. It should be present in the IPC. It is not against the constitutional principle because sedition law is not arbitrary in nature. It is required for ensuring unity and integrity of the country. It is required because if someone is raising slogans to secede from India, then you can impose sedition law against them. But this government should be careful enough not to impose this sedition law on every person whomever they meet. That is the reason why misuse of sedition law has happened in the past. That is the reason why people are demanding for rechecking, re-examining this sedition law, which is present in section 124 of the IPC. But Supreme Court has said that I will not repeal this sedition law. It is required. It is required at this particular time because there are many secessional tendencies happening in India. So it is originally drafted in 1837 by Thomas Macaulay. This is what I said, IPC. And it was not inserted in 1860 IPC, but it later inserted by this Sir James Stephen. So if the question comes, Thomas Macaulay has inserted this sedition law into this IPC, it is not right. It is inserted through the amendment of 1870, it was inserted into this IPC. That is the reason why you have this 124A, capital A. That means it is not present in the original text of IPC. It was amended later. So that's why this Sir James Stephen is also important. And the first case under sedition law is on J.C. Bose, that is Jogendra Chandra Bose, who is the editor of Bangobasi newspaper. And other convicts, other people who are booked under this sedition law is Balagangadhar Tilak, Annie Besant, Ali brothers, Shaukat Ali, these brothers, and Gandhiji. These are certain people who are also became victim to this sedition law. So they have criticized this sedition law. But now, in the present context, Supreme Court and government are reiteratingly saying that this law is required because there are many terrorist activities being done by certain organizations in India. So we have to use this sedition law. Supreme Court in Balwant Singh case has said that just by merely shouting slogans against the government should not make the government to impose this sedition law against that person. They said that if they use any arms, or if it creates any violence, then you can impose the sedition law. Otherwise, you should not impose the sedition law. So merely shouting slogans against the government do not qualify under the sedition law. That's what Supreme Court has said in the Balwant Singh case. Okay. Then Government of National Capital Territory of Delhi, GNCTD 2021. Delhi is always important, very important topic for the UPSC. So now go back to Union Territories chapter of Lakshmikant and read this chapter once. Okay. Every now and then Supreme Court is given that there is a fight going on between Supreme Court and the government of India. That is judiciary and legislature. Whenever judiciary comes with certain progressive measure, then legislature comes with a destructive measure. So what Supreme Court has said previously is that there is a legislature in the Delhi. That is, elected MLAs are there in Delhi. So whatever they have said, they have superior uh, say over the LG, that is Lieutenant Governor. So LG is subordinate to this legislative assembly because there is elected people, elected representatives are there. He is not elected. He is just like a governor. But this was said by the Supreme Court. But what government is saying, government wants to give more power to the LG rather than the elected legislative members of the Delhi. So now they have got this Government of National Capital Territory of Delhi, GNCTD Act 2021, to give more powers to the LG, not to the Legislative Assembly, but more powers to the LG. So commonsensical options, go with the common sense in the options in the examination. If they give more powers to the LG, then that is the right answer. Okay. So there is a fight between judiciary. Judiciary is saying give more importance to the elected government, but government is saying no, I will give more importance to the lieutenant governor only, because Delhi is not a state; it is just a union territory. That's what they say. Please read Union Territory chapter from Lakshmikant. Then guidelines for digital media and OTT. What is OTT? Full form of OTT? Over the top. So recently, most of the movies are being released through OTT and digital media platform. That is the reason why I thought this is also one of the important topic for this year's examination. So whenever central government oversight is there at the third level, the final level, and at the second level, there is self-regulation by the digital media platforms or OTT platform themselves, and there is grievance redressal by publisher. These are the three levels present. So just if they have to ask, they will ask simple question only in this digital media and OTT platforms. Then UAPA, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. This is very important. This Unlawful Activities Prevention Act is mainly for curbing the terrorist activities and unlawful activities. So this they have defined properly this unlawful activity. That is activity leading to cessation of unlawful activity. They have defined the unlawful activity in this UAPA Act. That is activity leading to cessation of a part of territory of India, questions sovereignty of India, and disrupt the integrity of the India. That is the reason why this particular UAPA is important. And they have defined. And the provisions present in this UAPA is also important because both Indian and foreign nationals can be charged. It is not only for the Indian nationals, but it is also for the foreign nationals. And if this particular person is present in outside India also, you can charge him with this UAPA Act. Okay, and the cases can be investigated by state police and NIA combinedly or individually. This is what important points about this Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, mainly to curb the terrorist activity in the country, cessation of, because these terrorist activities lead to cessation of the country and it impacts the unity and integrity of the country. That is the reason why we have passed this UAPA Act, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Then public intent data. This is the new concept given by the World Bank in its World Bank Development Report. If they have to ask, they will ask the definition of this public intent data. The definition of the public intent data is that data collected with the intent of serving the public good is called as public intent data. Data is collected with the intention of serving the public good is called as public intent data. So what kind of information comes under public intent data is administrative data, census, sample surveys, yes, citizen generated data or machine generated data, and geospatial data like by ISRO, Bhuvan Panchayat, all these things are there. These things come under the public intent data because this public intent data is used for development of the country or development of the society. That is the reason why this is allowed. That is the reason why in the World Bank's development report, World Bank has given this new term that is public intent data. Then democracy index. This index is released by Economist Intelligence Unit, which is I think already been asked in the UPSC, but they have to ask, they will again ask. So remember, democracy index is given by Economist Intelligence Unit. In the recent times, India has been downgraded. It is not upgraded, it is downgraded. Even though India has majority government, that is absolute government is there in India. That is single party winning absolute majority. That's what we say, absolute government. Even though we have this absolute government, our position in the democracy index has been degraded to 53rd position. Okay, this decline in the ranking is because of democratic backsliding, because of certain bills are being passed, certain acts are being passed without proper consultation with the people, and there is crackdowns on the civil liberties. That is through FCRA Act or through RTI Act. The government is cracking down the civil liberties or cracking down the civil society organizations. That is the reason why our rank in the democracy index has been declined. So India has been classified as flawed democracy along with USA, France, Brazil, etc. So don't worry, India is in line with USA in the flawed democracy. India is classified as flawed democracy. Then 3-language policy. Nothing much important is there, but if they have to ask, they will ask. So that's why I said it comes under the Ministry of Home Affairs. It doesn't come under the Ministry of Culture. FCRA also comes under the Ministry of Affairs, and 3-language policy also comes under Ministry of Home Affairs only. Why? Why it comes under the Home Affairs? Did you think why it comes under? Why not under Ministry of Culture or something like that? The Home Ministry is again and again saying Hindi should be imposed all over the country. Yes, why it comes under Ministry of Home Affairs? It is because language is one of the responsible determinant for unity and integrity of the country. Unity and integrity of the country. That is the reason of Home Affairs responsibility is to ensure public order, is to protect the law and order. If they are united through this language, then there will be less public order issues or law and order issues. That is the reason why they want to unite country through this language. So MHA in the recent time said that 3-language policy is not applicable to this union government offices. So in the union government offices, like for example, railway department is there, it's a union government office. Okay, these central PSBs are there. These union government, central government offices, only Hindi and English are allowed, not regional language. So 3-language policy is also present in NEP, National Education Policy also has mentioned about this 3-language policy. Then outcome budget. Recently they are asking very conceptual questions on budgets. So what is this outcome budget? Outcome budget is a budget which we propose, which we give the money to certain schemes based on their outcomes. Outlay, there is a difference between outlay and outcome. Outlay is how much amount of money is given to particular scheme, and outcome is the measurable performance of that particular scheme is called as outcome. So based on the outcome only, you will give the budget. So budget is not given at a time. For example, MGNRGA is there. MGNRGA, if you have sanctioned 50,000 crore to this MGNRGA, we are not giving 50,000 crore at a time. We will divide it into 4 halves. Okay, 4 halves we will divide, and every quarter based on their performance, based on the performance of this MGNRGA scheme in quarter 1, we will either increase or decrease. We will either increase or decrease the budget in the next quarter. Or for example, this year MGNRGA has failed. The next year we will reduce the money allocated to this particular scheme because it has failed. So that's what, based on the performance you are giving the money. If your performance is good, more money is given. If your performance is bad, less money is given. That is what called as outcome based budget. Other budgets are there. Zero based budget. Zero based budget is also there, which says that whatever the amount which is present, whatever the amount allocated last year is not the base for the allocating budget for the next year. For example, this year I have allocated 50,000 crore to MGNRGA. So generally what governments will follow under line item budgets. Line item budgets is that if you are giving 50,000 crore this year, then next year they will give 60,000 crore. The money will only increase, the money will not decrease under this normal budgets. But in the zero-based budget, they will not consider this 50,000 crore. They will again assess whether this particular scheme requires 50,000 crore or 40,000 crore, 30,000 crore. From zero, they will start. They will not keep 50,000 as the base. Understood what I'm saying? difference between outcome budget and zero-based budgeting. I think only few topics are there. We'll finish it fast in under 10 minutes. This STARS project is there. STARS project is strengthening the teacher learning, teacher learning and results for states. So this is whenever there is education kind of thing, World Bank will support us. Whenever there is learning scheme, there is World Bank will support us. So STARS project is strengthening the teaching and learning and results for the states to improve the Indian school education system. It is a centrally sponsored scheme. There is a difference between centrally sponsored scheme and central sector scheme. In the centrally sponsored scheme, both center and plus states sponsor the scheme, but in central sector scheme, only the center sponsors. So it is a centrally sponsored scheme, which is aided by the World Bank. So this is not implemented in all the states, but only it covers only 6 states: Himachal Pradesh, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Kerala, and Odisha. And the states will get support in developing, implementing, and evaluating and improving the interventions. For this, just they will ask STARS project is related to what? They have to ask the question. Then universal immunization program. Recently, COVID vaccine. These kind of vaccines are going on, first dose and second dose. Hence, I felt that this universal immunization program is also very much important. Under this, 12 vaccines are preventable. Whether presently COVID is not covered in this universal immunization program. COVID is covered under different vaccination program. Okay, free of cost is given. These 12 vaccines are given free of cost by the government. Basically, to increase the immunization coverage, launched in 1985 under Rajiv Gandhi government, and it is also central sector scheme. Even though health is present in the state subject, this vaccination is the responsibility of the center. So it is central sector scheme, 100% funded by the central government. So now what you have to do is that what all vaccines come under this UIP, it is your responsibility to know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if they have to ask, they will ask COVID comes under this UIP. No, COVID doesn't come under this universal immunization program. Next, Jal Jeevan Mission and Jal Jeevan Mission Urban and Jal Jeevan Mission Rural. So this is also important because this was asked in 2019 or 2020 PPSC mains paper they have asked. So both are centrally sponsored schemes. Universal coverage of water to all households and provide tap connection to every household. Both are universal in nature. And rejuvenation of water bodies is there for the urban Jal Jeevan Mission. It goes through the PPP model. PPP model is not present in Jal Jeevan Mission rural because it is not that much profitable in the rural area. That is the reason why private sector will not come forward. So it is a community-driven approach. That is, Gram Panchayats and local communities play a key role in implementing this Jal Jeevan Mission rural. This is the thing. And National Hydrology Project to collect reliable water resources data in the country. This National Hydrology Project is there. It is also a central sector scheme. So we have to know how much water is present. So only when we know how much water is present, we can efficiently utilize this water. So these are the components of this National Hydrology Project, that is National Water Resources Monitoring Systems, Information Systems, and Operation Planning Systems. This is the reason why this is important. Nowadays, floods are going on and droughts are also going on simultaneously. Hence, I felt that National Hydrology Project is important. Then dam rehabilitation. This is also central sector scheme. This is also central sector scheme because water is rivers are flowing between the states. So why it doesn't come under the central sponsored schemes because states will not show much interest because 2 states will fight again. Already they are fighting for river water sharing. They will again fight for sharing the money in this particular project. And center has taken complete responsibility to implement this hydrology project. Similar is the case with dam rehabilitation also. When 2 or 3 dams are there between 2 or which gives benefit to 2 to 3 states, then no state will take the responsibility to give the finances. Hence, center has taken this responsibility of dam rehabilitation and improvement project DRIP. Okay, to improve the safety and operational performance of selected and existing dams. So this Dharma tool is there. Don't confuse it with any cultural kind of thing. It is not related to it. It is related to dam health and rehabilitation monitoring application to digitize the dam related effectiveness, so that regular monitoring and regular maintenance is there for the dams. According to a report, it said that more than 100 dams in India are in a very bad condition, which can break at any point of time. That's what the report says. Newspaper report says. Next, Swamitva. So this is a survey of villages and mapping with improvised technology of village areas. So this generally what happens is that land records is a very humongous task for the district collectors or who are present at the ground level, MROs or district collectors, because who is the actual beneficiary of the land is not known until now, because land disputes are huge. People will bring new documents that this land belongs to me, this land belongs to me. That is the reason why Swamitva is launched, especially in the village areas where poverty is high. If they go for these land problems, then the poverty will not reduce. Hence, government came up with this Swamitva survey of villages, mapping with improvised technology in the village areas, to create accurate land records in the rural areas, to ensure financial stability and determination of the property tax in villages. Better Gram Panchayat development plan. It is also a central sector scheme, because villages responsibility is taken by the center. It aims to provide a record of rights to the village households owners. This is thing. Then Pragati is as asked in the UPSC means paper. I think it was asked in the UPSC prelims also, but there is a chance of repeating it. So Pragati is proactive governance and timely implementation. Generally, they will see whether any schemes or any policies are implemented effectively. There will be a three-tier system monitoring will be there, from PMO to Union Government Secretaries. So PM will directly monitor from the central level. PMO will directly monitor from the central level to government secretaries at the central level and chief secretary at the states. So this is a three-stage monitoring. Okay, through digital data management, video conferencing, and geospatial technology. So effective monitoring, the name itself says proactive governance and timely implementation of policies. So this Pragati, they will directly say Pragati is related to what. Okay, and it will strengthen the CP grants also. If there are any grievances, then they will be immediately address these grievances. Project monitoring group and Ministry of Statistics and program implementation is there. Then One Nation, One Ration Card. It provides for interstate and intrastate portability of the migrants. Okay, it basically benefits the migrants. Simple question only, but if they have to ask, they will ask. Interstate portability under IMPDS portal, that is Integrated Management of Public Distribution System, which comes under the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution, and intrastate portability is there. So this One Nation, One Ration Card is not just for interstate portability, it is also for intrastate portability, which is through Anna Vitran portal. It will display the electronic transactions through ePOS machines. So it reduces the bogus cards and it reduces the food subsidy bills by preventing the leakages. This is why One Nation, One Ration Card is important. Then CP grams. Until now, CP grams was not asked, but this time I'm expecting the CP grams. CP grams is, remember G here, grievances. So through the CP grams, anyone can raise the complaint, give complaint upon any government official through this CP grams portal. So this is this comes under the Ministry of Personal Public Grievances and Pensions for online grievances mechanism. Okay, online grievances mechanism can lodge complaint from any geographical location. If you are unable to go to any place, then you can directly launch your complaint in the CP grams. Now today only open this CP grams portal and just look into it. CP grams, public grievance and redressal mechanism. This is also one of the redressal mechanism apart from complaints or anti-corruption bureaus and everything. Court is also a grievance redressal mechanism only. And then next, Swadhar Grah versus Garima Grah. Swadhar Grah is for the women. Okay, this is implemented by Ministry of Women and Child Development. set up Swadharagah in every district with a capacity of 30 women is there. So women are allowed. It doesn't just provide the shelter, but it also gives the legal aid for their adjustment in the family and start fresh life with dignity and conviction. So women more than 18 years of age can get the shelter here, and girls up to 18 years of age who are there with this mother, and boys up to 8 years of age can stay in this Swadharagah home. Okay. People who are present in this Swadharagah are eligible for this direct benefit transfer schemes also, food and everything. Then there is Garima Grah. Garima Grah is for the transgender persons. Shelter home for transgender persons. First such shelter home is present in Vadodara. It is implemented by Minister of Social Justice and Empowerment, not by the Minister of Transgenders. Anything comes under the Social Justice and Empowerment, not under Minister of Women and Child Development. Okay, remember this. Transgenders related things come under Minister of Social Justice and Empowerment. Next, last one, Manabandhu Kalyan Yojana, which is implemented under Tribal Minister of Tribal Affairs. So whatever related to the tribal, it comes under the central sector scheme. Generally, not central sponsored scheme. So Manabandhu, which means Manabandhu Kalyan means development of tribals. So improving the quality of life of tribals, improving the quality of education, sustainable employment, bridging infrastructure gap, promoting tribal culture and heritage. These things are there. So it is basically a convergence scheme of various schemes of development in a tribal area for ensuring enhanced development of the tribal regions. So it is a central sector scheme covering all tribal people in all areas of the country. Okay, so it is not a central sponsored scheme. And last topics, AWEB, not much important, but I felt that some bouncers can be come in the examination. Association of World Election Bodies. AWEB means Association of World Election Bodies, where India has chaired this AWEB for 1 year. This is basically to strengthen the election management in the member countries, where the democratic countries are there. Their elections are mandatory. So to ensure proper elections are being conducted in the countries, this Association of World Election Bodies has been set up. This headquarters is present in Seoul, that is South Korea, established in 2003 for conducting free and fair elections, improving free and fair elections in the democratic countries. And there is last one, that is opinion poll versus exit poll. Opinion poll is done before the elections and exit poll is done after the elections. Okay, it is conducted before balloting and it is conducted after the elections. For example, if you in some of the polling booths, you will see extra one EVM machine will be there. They will ask you how you have voted in that ballot. Same kind of vote should be there in this ballot also. That is called as exit poll. It is conducted before balloting. The name itself says exit. Once you exit out of the room, there will be some media agencies or NGOs. They will ask for, please do vote similar way how you voted in the inside the room. That is called as exit poll. Opinion poll is they will ask whom do you want to vote on all these things before the elections. Before the elections. So this is the difference between exit poll and opinion poll. So EC has declared exit polls should not be telecasted after the final phase of election polling has been done, because it will influence the voters. That is the reason why they will say that collect the information, but don't disclose the information before the last poll has happened, last final phase of the polling has happened in the district or the state. And no opinion polls could be conducted for the constituency that has already voted. Once the voting is done, you can't conduct this opinion poll because they can't reveal whom they have voted. If they reveal whom they have voted, then the other party person will gain grudge or will have some kind of anger against that person that he has not voted in favor of me. So that is the reason why opinion poll should not be conducted for the constituencies which have already voted. This is the difference between opinion poll and exit poll. So these are the important things. There are 10 to 15 important topics are there, which I will be giving notes directly to you through the WhatsApp. All important things I have said. More than this, I don't think the UPSC examination will focus upon. Thank you for patiently listening to me. I hope it is helpful to you.